Welcome to our 5 Women 5 Day series in honour of International Women's Day 2021. I'm Sonia Beselich and I have the pleasure in this series to feature brief chats with Australian women writers, and you'll see them here joining me today. There is Jane Smith, Allison Paterson, Elizabeth Cummings and Diane Evans. And today we're acknowledging the theme Choose to Challenge and also celebrating perseverance and resilience. Joining me on day 2 is Allison Paterson. Welcome, Allison.
Hello, Sonia. Thanks for inviting me along.
Well, you've got so much to share with us, so it's going to be a challenge in itself to keep this brief. But let me give a bit of an intro so that everyone can learn a little bit about who you are. Allison is the author of both adult and children's books, including the highly successful Australia Remembers series, which introduces children to Australia's military history. Allison was a teacher librarian for over 20 years and was a recipient of a 2017 May Gibbs Children's Literature Trust Creative Time Fellowship. Allison has pursued her dreams and now works full-time as a writer, publishing consultant, and presenter in schools. You're a busy lady, Allison.
I am, Sonia. It does keep me very busy. We need to get time to write.
We want a lot of time to write.
Yeah, that's
now,
fun.
your Anzac Sons books tell us the story of your ancestors. 5 brothers who went off to the First World War, and they sent hundreds of letters home from the front. Their horrific experiences are well documented in your books, but we also get a glimpse of the suffering of their mother, so your great-grandmother, especially after the deaths of 3 of them. Now, she wouldn't have been the only woman to have endured such loss. So tell us about the experience of World War I from a woman's perspective.
So, Sonia, I can't even imagine what it was like for those women who were displaced by war in the theatres of war. But from the Australian perspective, I have got a lens into what life was like for those women. As you mentioned in Anzac Sons, a lot of the letters that the boys sent home to their mum actually appear in here. And it was in their responses to her questions that I came to know her very, very well, and their constant reassurance to her. So I felt incredible empathy for her during the writing of that book. And her children, her boys, the 5 young men who were at war, were the ages of my children at that time. And so it was quite an emotional journey for me because I felt like I was living that experience with her. And bearing in mind that at that time, the communication for women who were still at home could be 6 weeks, a letter arriving. So in that period of time, they may have had a telegram saying, their son had been injured or was missing, or the worst possible news. Yet her other boys were writing home saying, we know George is okay, he's in a hospital and he's going to be all right. And so the false hope that set up for women was very, very difficult for them, coping without their loved ones there with them. And that communication issue that they had as well was just horrendous for them. So they were very, very stoic. And of course, you've also got the women who served in the theatres of war too, with largely in that medical sphere. And we hear their voices in a lot of publications that we have now, and we are celebrating their contribution as well. And there were nurses, doctors, ambulance drivers, women who supported in lots and lots of ways. But yeah, for the women at home, the mums, the daughters, the loved ones, it was an incredibly difficult time, difficult social time too, because there was a lot of division in terms of conscription. So there was a lot of social issues happening at the same time. I like to think of them as the Anzac women. Yes. The unsung heroes of the war. It was an incredibly stoic generation, I think, and to be able to hear their voices would be wonderful. We don't often hear their voices because those letters that they might have sent were not preserved. I do have a few which were with the young men when they passed away, But yeah, and they were like gold to me, to be honest. To actually see her handwriting and experience that emotion with her. Yeah, so that was it. It was a tough time for women, absolutely.
Hugely challenging.
Yeah, and then even when they came, if you were lucky to have your loved one come home, they often came home with severe injuries and what we know today is post-traumatic stress disorder. So they also needed to adjust to their loved ones not being the way they were before they left for war.
That's right, and you've reinforced just multi-layered levels of challenge for everyone, for humanity, basically.
Yeah, absolutely.
It just seems like a really surreal experience. Even the whole writing process would have just seemed out of this world.
It was very emotional, to be honest.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, you also researched widely, Alison, for your latest books in the Australia Remembers series, which deal with aspects of Australia's military history. Has the role, there we go, 1 and 2, has the role of women in war changed significantly over the generations?
Absolutely. As I mentioned, women obviously were serving in the medical sphere, but were not able to enlist in armed services. In World War II, that changed quite incredibly, actually, because the war came to Australia and all of a sudden there was a shortage of manpower. We needed everybody to help. And so women were encouraged to enlist. And served in many aspects in the Defence Forces at that time, and also started to fill roles that men were traditionally employed in. So they went into factories. They were doing loads of work that men would normally be doing. So doors suddenly opened up to them. But of course, when the war ended, there was an expectation that women would go back to that traditional role again, and in many cases they did. But I think there was an attitude change, both for men and women. And I feel that there was an element of paving the way for what was to happen next. And actually, I think today, I'm not in the military, so I'm just quoting a statistic that I'm not really sure of, but I think there are around 18% of the service personnel today are actually women. So that's a big change, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, slow and steady, but it certainly has changed.
It has
so
changed.
Alison, what do you hope readers will take away from reading your books about war?
Well, I think for children, I want them to understand the important role that defence has in terms of keeping us safe and maintaining our quality of life that we have. And always respecting them and remembering that service that has been provided. And in my new book, which is released this week, so good timing, in Australia Remembers, it's about the customs and traditions of the Australian Defence Force. So in this one, what I hope to do is demystify some of those things we see on Anzac Day and on Remembrance Day, some of the things that we see that we don't really understand. Why do they do these things? What does all of the accoutrements that they wear, what are all those for? So we go through there, and I've worked really closely with the 3 services to actually bring that book together, the history sections of those 3 services. So yeah, a little demystification for the children.
Yeah,
and for adults too, I understand.
I'm pretty sure it would be for adults too. Definitely, definitely.
Yes.
And with your picture books, there's a focus on the role of women. Did you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. Well, in Granny's Place and Shearing Time, I grew up on a farm. And so I love writing about rural life. And in Shearing Time, I write about my favourite time of the year. And that, of course, was shearing time. My parents had 3 daughters, no sons. So we were the unpaid labour force. And so we got to work in the shed. We were the rouseabouts, and we'd be mustering as well. And that was in the 70s. So in a time when women weren't always seen in sheds. And so that was a great experience for us. But I'd never met a female shearer. But today there are so many of them, and they're wonderful at it. They're very good shearers, And I just love celebrating that fact. It's fabulous, really fabulous that they're there.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I think it's important to highlight the diversity of what women are doing, you know, in the current day too. That's
Well,
really important.
rural women, again, the unsung heroes of Australia. They've always worked really, really hard on the farm in various roles, but we don't hear a lot about that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So tell us where we can learn more about your books, Alison.
Here we go. Look at that.
Oh, look, you're organised.
So this is the same for all of us, I believe, apart from mine. So you can ask at your local bookshop about my books. If they're not there, they can be ordered in. Otherwise, I've got links on my website, Simon & Schuster, as well as the distributors of the book, and Big Sky Publishing, of course, as the publishers. So, yep, you can find my books there.
Wonderful. So before we sign off, a woman or women that inspire you or you admire?
Yeah, here she is. This is my grandma.
Oh.
And she was an adolescent in World War I. So she was one of the stoic women of that generation who did her bit to support the people that she loved when they were on the Western Front. And she married a veteran, obviously, and survived tough years through the Depression, brought up 4 children, went through the fear-filled years of World War II. She was generous of spirit, community-minded, warm and solid. She was just fabulous. I adored her. And often now when I have a little bit of a thought, what do I do about something? I often think, what would Grandma do? So she's with me all the time. She looks over my shoulder too, keeping an eye on me.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Allison Paterson, thank you so much for joining the 5 Women 5 Day series for International Women's Day 2021.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you.